This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil with a stock market update. I'm going to start out with the market conditions, and there is one in particular talking about volatility that is starting to move up a little bit and actually happening on both time frames for the first time in quite some time. So I thought it's worth delving into that and see what it really means to the market. Now, before we get into that, let me just tell you that if you have an interest in learning more about some of these techniques I'm going to show you, I would suggest starting with the book, which I'm offering at a discount right now. Go to rabilstockresearch.com/book for more information. Okay, we're going to start out with the underlying market conditions and just as a starting point. So we've got the sentiment that we're looking at. We've got an overbought, oversold indicator that we're looking at. We've got a volatility condition that we're looking at, but both weekly and daily. And then we've got momentum conditions we're watching on 3 different time frames, monthly, weekly, daily, and then finally the trending conditions, monthly, weekly, daily. Now I'm going to cover this part when I go to the individual time frames and get into and delve into that more in depth. But we'll start out with the sentiment, and I use Investors Intelligence Sentiment Survey, and it's staying the same up in this 46 region, which is up in the it's up there. All right, this is a very bullish reading. This is not, so that's a negative. All right, when we get too many bulls right now. And it's hovering in that anywhere from 35 to 45%. Right now we're at 46. I mean, if we get closer to 50, then that's really a danger zone. Right now, I just think the risk is higher. Now, as I mentioned in the last week or two, these two conditions they're not a timing tool. All right. And this has been climbing. And just to give you an idea, back in the top of 2021, before it topped out and we started a bear market in 22, in 21, it was like the summer where this started to get up into these levels. It was late summer. So it ended up taking the balance of the year before it actually kicked in. All right. So you want to recognize that this is a condition and not necessarily a timing tool. So that's number one, but it is on the negative side, right? Now, this overbought, oversold oscillator is a 5-period RSI, which is short term, but if you can see, it's been overbought basically this entire year. This is the RSI 5 on the weekly S&P. It's it's up at 88. It's really high. I mean, the highest you can get is 100. It doesn't get there very often. It doesn't usually stay in the high 80s this often. This is a very rare sequence. We don't usually see an S&P move like this. You can go back historically speaking. You just don't have this many periods where you have consistent up move that is just so persistent. All right. So both of those are negative. Again, not necessarily a timing tool. And I think a lot of people believe that an overbought, oversold oscillator is a timing tool, but it isn't. It's a condition. We're up, we're overbought, but we need price to confirm any one of these conditions. And that's why we save that for the end. All right, so I want to get into the volatility a little bit, and I want to point out that the daily has been negative. I'm going to show you that in a second. But this week, the change that we had is the weekly actually went from being trending to the downside to now the average true range ever crossed above its moving average. Now it's just barely above, but it is above. So I got to put it in the neutral camp. Now the trend and the volatility are still positive kind of across the board. I'll go into the implications of what I see in this volatility as we move into these other areas. So let's start looking at the charts now. And you can see the trend of the average true range. So this is the moving average of the average true range. I use an 18-period moving average, and this is the average true range just for the bars. So we're trying to determine how big are these bars. Now, because we're using average true range, when there's a gap, we include that in the size of the bar, right? That's the size for that. Here's the open. This is essentially where it opened, right? And you fill that in. So that's actually a pretty big size bar. So you start filling in these gaps, and all of a sudden you're looking at some pretty good sized bars that are taking place. Even today doesn't look like a very big range day, but when you fill in the gap, right, all these gaps, that's the reason why this is starting to climb. All right. So now, So that condition is troubling, right? It's an increased risk. When we see an increase in volatility, we expect there to be more risk in the market. I'm going to go into the reasons why this could be a little bit, when we get into the charts themselves, I'm going to go into the reasons why this could play out a little bit different than normal. All right, if we go to the weekly, this is where we have a change this week. We actually see that the average true range did just barely climb above its moving average, just by a couple ticks, but it is enough to call it neutral now. The fact that this has moved up a little bit. So you can see we've got a pretty solid trend, but we've got a pretty good sized bar. So we've got 1 day left in the week. Let's see if this actually has a pretty good day and if you got a pretty good sized bar here, right? I mean, if we had some kind of a blow off move on Friday, I don't think you're going to be able to get a really good size bar, maybe not even the size of this one. But you never know. I mean, if we get some strength here, it's possible that, we'd be seeing some kind of a little blow off starting out. One of the things I've been doing, especially if you go back since this bottom right here, we have not taken out a weekly low. All right. Now, I keep saying this on my weekly report for my subscribers that we got to take that out, and that should coincide with a break of this 18, which would cause it to roll over. If we have that take place, that would be more of the trigger for this high volatility condition. It also could easily increase the volatility on the weekly. Now, don't jump the gun and assume that there's a problem here on this time frame. This could easily just be, one big bar to the upside after 2 sideways consolidation bars, pause bars. Doesn't have to be a negative. This could, just like what happened here, we could just pop up and then drop back down. But we've got to keep our guard up right now and stay on our toes. Just based on how long this has gone up, it's just pretty extensive. By the way, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. Let's see if we can grow this channel a little bit. All right, let's start looking at the individual time frames. And when I say extensive, I mean, we're up 5 months here. All right. Now, as I've said, and we've got another over a week left, it's only the 22nd. So we've got, 5 months up. If we make it through the end of this month looking like this, it's possible it'll keep going. If it does, then we kind of probably start thinking that it's going to blow off in some shape or form and form some kind of a climax. But the momentum signs are pretty good. I mean, you can see in green DI making a pretty strong move, and it's causing the ADX to at least be rising. Now, I mean, if you notice, it's starting from a really low area, but the fact that it's rising is important. I know the bogey is this 25 line, but when it's rising, we have to respect it. And just like the way this happened here, it did take a while for the ADX to get going, but it started rising right about here. All right, so we're in kind of the same boat. It's very possible this wants to keep carrying right now. So we don't want to use, there's no sign in the momentum, at least on the monthly, that there's a problem yet. Same thing on the weekly. Look at what's going on here. The ADX is rising strongly, and it's at 47 and change. There's no sign of it tipping over or anything. Now, I do recognize that even though this has been climbing, that this has kind of dropped off a little bit, and it's not really confirming at this point. However, we don't have a pivot in place. We have not made any kind of a reversal or anything like that. So you don't really draw any conclusions until we make a pivot. We'd have to take out a weekly low and really do it on a closing basis, like close below the high bar. If we do that, then you could start to say we've got real divergence in place. The other thing I would tell you is look at what the red DI is doing. The sellers are so weak. There's not a seller in sight based on the way I'm seeing it here. So really, I think what we should be on the lookout for is for this to pop. I think that would be a pretty important indication that maybe sellers have finally gotten to the point where we're saying, you know what, this is ridiculous. I'm going to finally take profits. We haven't seen that yet on this time frame. Now, what I will say is that based on the buying slowdown, we have started to see the daily ADX start to drop off. So we've got a divergent peak that has now dropped down under 25. You see what I mean? Now, we're at a new high right now, and yet this is below 25. You see how that's the first time that's happened? So if you keep following the trend and the pivots, and you made a new high here and then pulled back and formed a pivot high, and now we've made a new pivot low and hitting a new high, we're not confirming right now. Now, if this keeps going, then this is probably going to pop to the upside. All right. So don't get too jumpy with this because the green DI is still in command. We don't see enough sellers, still don't have enough sellers. We've got this sort of horizontal trend line in place here just above the 25 line. We're going to need to see this pop and this really break down. They're essentially going to need to crisscross to give us a signal. And that hasn't happened since really the start of the year. In fact, all they did was kind of come and kiss, and then green took over again. So we want to see a more definitive sign. I think that'll take place when we break the 18. If we do that in a violent way, we're going to finally roll this line over. Just hasn't happened. We've broken the line a few times, but it hasn't rolled over. So that's really what we're on the lookout for. You got to be really careful looking for divergences right now. All right. I mean, we don't need to jump the gun. Like, we know the backdrop is starting, the momentum is slowing a little bit, but it could still have one more pop to the upside. And the reason why I'm saying that, especially now, is that we know that the volatility is starting to increase on the weekly. So what if that means that we're going to get some kind of a pop to the upside, like get some kind of a little breakout move that causes this to form some form of a climax? Now, I know that's what I'm saying has to happen. It doesn't have to happen. All right. I'm just trying to think a few moves ahead. It could come down. It could just stay in this sequential wave and keep trending to the upside. It could also make a really strong move to the upside, have some kind of a correction, and never really break down to any significant degree on this time frame. It's possible to do that. I'm just saying, just based on the length of the move, if we get some kind of a dynamic move to the upside, we should be on the lookout for a volume explosion and some kind of a climax. If it takes place that way, probably going to happen in the form of, probably take a 3 to 4 week move or something like that. Now, let's just take a quick peek at the hourly. I don't think this is as important. In the last couple of reviews, I haven't even mentioned it, even though we saw some negative action here. It just, we need the daily to trigger below its 18. We need the weekly to break a weekly low. Until we start worrying about this time frame, I think it'll show up. Like, if we're getting a real problem develop, it's going to show up on those time frames, especially the daily chart breaking the 18. So don't be too jumpy. I mean, this has been pretty sloppy along the way. Actually, we've got pretty good strength in this move right now. And I would tell you that, if we start to get some kind of a pullback into here, it's probably a viable pullback just based on the strength that we're seeing. All right, so that's the update for the week. Let me know if you have any questions.